Welcome back, everyone. Today we delve into a chilling, unsolved mystery that unfolded far out in the Aegean Sea, where the horizon stretches into infinity and the azure waters merge seamlessly with the sky. Aboard a grand Royal Caribbean cruise ship, newlyweds George Smith and Jennifer stood on the open deck, feeling the cool ocean breezes and marveling at the breathtaking vista before them. The boundless sea seemed to mirror their own bright future, a journey filled with endless promise, love, and ambitious plans. Yet, what was meant to be an unforgettable Mediterranean honeymoon quickly transformed into a dark, incomprehensible nightmare that captivated the world. The tragic turn of events came to light on the morning of July 5, 2005. Around 8 a.m. on Deck 7, 16-year-old Emily Rausch from Chicago was preparing to greet another sunny day at sea. Looking out from her cabin window, she spotted something deeply unsettling that immediately sent a wave of alarm through her. Smeared across the white canopy above a life-saving boat was a terrifying sight: dark red stains of blood. Right near the outer edge of the structure, a heavier pool of blood suggested a horrifying scenario: that someone had been severely injured before plunging over the railing into the abyss below. Refusing to ignore the disturbing scene, Emily rushed to alert the ship's crew. Within moments, nearby passengers gathered on the deck, staring in shock at the grim marks. Whispers turned into tense, anxious discussions as horror settled over Deck 7, sparking a chilling mystery that would soon dominate international headlines. The tragic center of this haunting ordeal was cabin 962. In a single night, the newlywed couple's overwhelming joy vanished, replaced by an inexplicable tragedy. Speculation exploded almost immediately. Was it a tragic, drunken accident? A violent robbery gone wrong? Or perhaps a cold, premeditated murder? As investigators stepped in, the cruise ship became a complex labyrinth of conflicting clues and elusive suspects. Key evidence pointed toward multiple individuals on board, each desperately guarding their own secrets. It soon became glaringly obvious that several people on the liner knew far more about that fate-filled night than they were letting on. To this day, investigators, journalists, and true crime enthusiasts around the globe remain consumed by a single haunting question: what truly transpired under the cover of darkness on that desolate stretch of water? To understand the impact of this tragedy, one must look at the man at its center. Born and raised in Greenwich, Connecticut, George Smith was a bright, curious, and remarkably cheerful young man. He grew up in a warm, loving household where family was always the absolute priority. George shared an exceptionally tight bond with his parents and his sister Bree. His father, George Smith Sr., personally owned and operated a local liquor store, a family business driven by genuine passion rather than mere profit. George was equally dedicated and ambitious. In 2000, he graduated with a business degree from Babson College in Massachusetts. He initially moved to Boston to work as a computer data mining analyst, gaining valuable corporate experience. However, his true passion always lay back home. Driven by loyalty and a strong sense of purpose, George eventually returned to Connecticut to join the family store. Under his father's expert guidance, he set out to master every nuance of the trade, preparing to take over the business so his hard-working parents could finally enjoy a well-deserved retirement. Life seemed to fall perfectly into place in 2002, when George attended a gathering with mutual friends and met Jennifer. A fellow Connecticut native, Jennifer was intelligent, stunning, and deeply ambitious, a vibrant young woman who was just beginning her career as an elementary school teacher. The connection was instant and effortless. They fell deeply in love, and George's parents warmly welcomed her into their family with open arms. 3 years later, in 2005, 26-year-old George and Jennifer exchanged vows, setting off on the romantic honeymoon cruise that would forever alter their destinies. And so they stood on the threshold of a promising new chapter. Their magical wedding unfolded at the breathtaking Castle Hill Inn in Newport, Rhode Island, where they exchanged vows directly along the oceanfront, a picturesque backdrop perfectly suited for such a momentous occasion. Immediately following the ceremony, the newlyweds set off on their dream honeymoon aboard one of Royal Caribbean's most majestic luxury liners for a 12-day voyage across the Aegean Sea. Departing from Barcelona on June 29th, the cruise charted a glamorous path along the French Riviera before gliding down the stunning Italian coast. Aboard the ship, George and Jennifer quickly connected with another couple and a 20-year-old traveler from California named Josh Askin. Known for his sharp wit and easygoing humor, Josh instantly hit it off with George, and the lively group became inseparable. On July 1, while anchored off Italy, they headed ashore to explore together. By July 4th, they were soaking in the magic of Mykonos, wandering narrow historic alleys, swimming in the crystal-clear Aegean waters, and enjoying local delicacies at charming taverns. Filled with joy and high spirits, they soaked up the enchanting atmosphere, leaving Mykonos with unforgettable memories and every intention of keeping the celebration going back on the ship. Following a romantic dinner on board, George and Jennifer met up with their friends to continue the festivities. The evening was packed with laughter, delicious drinks, and lively conversation as the group savored the high-energy atmosphere. Next, the newlyweds and Josh headed into the ship's vibrant casino. George and Josh tried their luck at the craps table, while Jennifer enjoyed a few rounds of poker. By the time the tables wrapped up, the couple had lost a fairly significant sum of money, yet they simply laughed it off. After all, they were on their honeymoon. When the casino closed, the group clearly wanted to keep the night alive. Surveillance cameras captured the last known footage of George around 2:30 a.m. as he walked out of the casino floor, though he was not heading back to his room just yet. By the early morning hours of July 5, 2005, near the Greek island of Mykonos, this joyous getaway turned into a dark mystery. 26-year-old George Smith had vanished without a trace. What had started as a harmless night of luxury and fun took an inexplicably sinister turn. Suspicion mounted when the ship's captain inspected the couple's cabin, as well as the deck area directly below their window where unsettling marks were discovered. Inside cabin 962, there was no sign of the newlyweds. The physical evidence left behind pointed towards something far more dangerous than an accidental fall, sparking fears of foul play. As news of the bloodstains spread rapidly throughout the liner, panic took hold among the passengers. The crew immediately locked down Deck 7, cordoning off the entire area and keeping passengers restricted to their cabins. Ship personnel thoroughly searched every venue and hidden corner of the liner in a desperate attempt to locate the missing couple. Given the ominous pool of blood found on the lifeboat canopy, the senior officer took control of the scene and personally headed to their stateroom, where the growing trail of evidence led to a harrowing primary hypothesis. George Smith had somehow gone overboard into the dark depths of the sea. Meanwhile, as anxiety mounted across the liner, the frantic search for the missing newlyweds pressed on. By 10 a.m., ship personnel finally located Jennifer in the luxury spa, where she was peacefully attending a pre-booked massage session. Her face showed profound shock and distress upon hearing the news. She claimed to have no idea where her husband was, stating she had not seen him since the previous night. Jennifer explained that when she woke up alone, his absence did not immediately raise red flags. Knowing George had been out late drinking with friends, she assumed he had crashed in another cabin. Unbothered by his absence, she simply went ahead with her scheduled morning spa treatment. By noon, Turkish authorities boarded the ship to launch a formal investigation. The captain addressed the anxious crowd, explaining that local law enforcement had to step in to uncover the truth and urging full cooperation. Police immediately focused their attention on Jennifer. Her visibly shaken state, paired with her vague timeline, made her a primary person of interest. She recounted that ship personnel in white uniforms had knocked on her door to break the devastating news that her husband may have fallen overboard, pointing out the gruesome bloodstains discovered on the lifeboat canopy. Investigators moved quickly to process cabin 962, uncovering a scene of unsettling chaos. The room was in disarray, showing clear signs of a hurried search or a violent struggle. In the bathroom, small drops of blood stained both the carpet and a towel, while faint fingerprints were lifted from the balcony railing. Turkish forensic teams also identified 2 small bloodstains on the bed sheets, each measuring roughly 2 centimeters. DNA testing later confirmed the blood belonged to George, suggesting he had suffered severe physical trauma inside the stateroom before disappearing. The balcony, however, presented the most intriguing clues. A chair had been deliberately repositioned right next to the glass barrier, and scuff marks on the top railing suggested someone had sat on the edge. While these details led some, including the captain, to speculate that an intoxicated George might have accidentally tumbled over, the tall safety railing combined with the trail of blood inside the cabin strongly hinted at a far more sinister possibility: murder. Determined to reconstruct that fateful night, detectives turned their attention to the young men George had been partying with. When questioned, the group admitted that both George and Jennifer had consumed excessive amounts of alcohol. They claimed that an incapacitated George had to be helped back to cabin 962, where they removed his shoes and tucked him into bed before leaving. They insisted Jennifer was nowhere to be found, assuming she would return later. However, glaring contradictions quickly emerged in their statements. Josh Askin claimed he saw Jennifer leaving with a casino employee named Lloyd, alleging the two shared an undeniable spark right in front of George. Yet, security footage directly contradicted his narrative. Surveillance cameras captured Jennifer at 3:30 a.m., stumbling down the hallway alone and parting ways with the group, leaving a vulnerable, intoxicated George behind with his newfound acquaintances. What truly happened behind closed doors remained shrouded in mystery, but one thing was clear: the investigation was entering a treacherous web of lies, secrets, and deceit. Furthermore, card key logs revealed that Josh returned to his stateroom at 3:25 a.m., a timeline confirmed by his girlfriend, whom he woke up upon entering. These glaring discrepancies raised immediate red flags for investigators, fueling suspicions that Josh Askin was deliberately concealing critical details to protect his own motives. As detectives pressed deeper, every newly uncovered fact only added layers of intrigue to an already baffling puzzle. Among the young crowd on board was 19-year-old Greg Rosenberg, who was vacationing with his family and close companions, including his cousin Zach Rosenberg and their good friend Rostislav Kaufman. Though all three shared Russian heritage, they held American passports and resided in New York City. Their evening of high-stakes entertainment began inside the casino, where Jennifer and Greg Rosenberg decided to test their luck at the poker tables. The gambling session stretched late into the night. When the floor finally closed at 2:30 a.m., the energetic crew was eager to keep the party going and migrated straight to the ship's disco to dance and drink. Joining their lively circle was Lloyd Botha, the casino manager, who willingly plunged into the late-night revelry. As the hours slipped away, however, witness accounts began to fracture. The group had become visibly intoxicated and increasingly rowdy. In accordance with ship policies regarding disruptive behavior, crew members eventually cut off alcohol service to the overly boisterous partygoers. Refusing to let the night end, the young men remembered an unopened bottle of absinthe they had purchased earlier during their stop on the island of Mykonos. Even though cruise regulations strictly prohibited passengers from consuming personal alcohol in public areas, Josh slipped away to his nearby stateroom to retrieve the high-proof spirit. The bottle was exceptionally potent, boasting an alcohol content exceeding 70%. To help his friend sneak the contraband past security, George volunteered to conceal the bottle inside the waistband of his shorts. Shortly after 3 a.m., as a quiet hush settled over the rest of the liner, an observant janitor caught the group, consisting of Greg, Zach, Rostislav, Josh, and George, secretly passing around the absinthe. This brazen violation of ship rules did not go unnoticed, and quickly became a crucial piece of evidence for investigators reconstructing the timeline. Yet the men were not the only ones heavily under the influence that night. Jennifer, who had appeared relatively calm and composed earlier in the evening, underwent a dramatic shift. Witnesses reported that she began stumbling, and at one point leaned heavily against Lloyd, the casino manager. Observers were divided on her intentions. Some assumed she was merely struggling to maintain her balance, while others perceived the gesture as overt flirting. Tension soon boiled over between the newlyweds. According to onlookers, a sharp conflict erupted between George and Jennifer. Whether they were merely bantering or engaged in a genuine dispute remains unclear, but at one point, Jennifer struck George. Witnesses could not definitively say if the blow was delivered playfully or in a flash of drunken anger. Right around 3:30 a.m., a visibly intoxicated Jennifer stumbled away from the venue alone, leaving her husband behind in the company of his new acquaintances. That departure proved to be the ultimate turning point of the night. Her erratic walk down the hallway immediately caught the attention of ship staff, setting off a chain of events that would forever alter their lives. The janitor, who had previously spotted the young men drinking absinthe, immediately noticed Jennifer's erratic movements. Stepping in to help, he supported her toward the elevator and watched as she stepped off on her deck. However, a strange discrepancy occurred. Instead of turning left toward her stateroom, she veered right in the opposite direction. Later, Jennifer was found passed out in the hallway, far from her room. 2 security guards and a female duty officer had to use a wheelchair to transport her back to her quarters. By the time they arrived, it was 4:52 a.m., but George was nowhere to be found. Inside, the heavy balcony curtains were drawn tightly, remaining eerily still despite the ocean breeze. This detail raised a critical question. Was George even capable of reaching the balcony on his own, after his new companions had allegedly tucked him into bed? In a neighboring cabin, Deputy Chief of Police Cleet Hyman and his wife were jolted awake at 4 a.m. by disturbing noises coming from stateroom 962. Hyman immediately called guest services and banged on the adjoining wall, shouting at his neighbors to quiet down. His actions brought a momentary silence, but loud talking soon resumed for about 3 minutes, before escalating into a heated argument on the balcony. Hyman and his wife heard someone repeat "good night" several times, as if urgently trying to push people out of the cabin. This was followed by the sound of heavy furniture scraping across the floor, and, finally, a violent thud resembling a heavy object hitting the deck below. Curious and concerned, Hyman opened his door to investigate and spotted 3 unidentified men leaving the area. Other passengers nearby also reported hearing a loud, thudding impact that sounded like a body striking the lifeboat canopy, followed by a woman's scream. However, no witness could definitively confirm whether a woman was actually inside the stateroom at that moment. According to eyewitness accounts, 4 young men had originally entered the cabin, but only 3 were seen exiting. Could the 4th individual have remained inside to search for cash, knowing the newlyweds had spent generously at the casino? This line of inquiry made the theory of a botched robbery extremely compelling. Yet, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav presented solid alibis, claiming they were in another stateroom just minutes after Hyman saw the 3 men in the hallway. Keycard records for cabin 962 confirmed the group entered at 4:05 a.m., with no subsequent electronic entries recorded. Consequently, several competing theories emerged regarding George Smith's fate. The first major hypothesis centered on a violent robbery. While George and Jennifer seemed relatively sober when leaving the casino at 2:30 a.m., their complete inability to navigate back to their room by 3:30 a.m. suggested they may have been unknowingly drugged. Furthermore, casino patrons recalled the couple openly discussing large sums of cash, potentially from wedding gifts or gambling winnings, with estimates reaching tens of thousands of dollars. George was also wearing an expensive Breitling watch, while Jennifer wore a valuable engagement ring. The chaotic state of the room suggested a desperate search for these riches, and the bloodstains on the bedsheets could have resulted from a struggle as an intruder forcibly yanked the luxury watch from George's wrist. The second primary theory pointed toward the extreme effects of alcohol and hallucinogenic substances. Upon learning about the excessive drinking taking place that night and examining the scuff marks on the balcony railing, the captain began to suspect that pure intoxication may have played a fatal role. The captain initially theorized that an unintentional accident had occurred, perhaps a tragic slip during a drunken scuffle that sent George plunging over the balcony railing. This sparked intense speculation regarding the potential hallucinogenic dangers of the absinthe consumed that night. Toxicologists, however, clarify that any mind-altering effects depend entirely on the drink's concentration of thujone, while black-market absinthe might contain high enough levels to induce hallucinations. The bottle purchased officially by the young men in Europe was strictly regulated under European Union law. Experts emphasize that the thujone levels in commercial absinthe are far too low to cause visions. Consuming enough of it to experience hallucinations would lead to fatal alcohol poisoning long before any mind-altering state could be achieved. Consequently, the theory of a drug-induced hallucination lacks credible scientific evidence. As the investigation intensified, FBI agents subjected key individuals to polygraph examinations. Both Jennifer and casino manager Lloyd Botha passed their lie detector tests without issue. However, Josh Askin failed his polygraph miserably. While his failure suggested he was guarding dark secrets about George's fate, investigators acknowledged it could also have stemmed from intense pressure during questioning. A far more chilling piece of evidence surfaced in the form of a video recording featuring the young men joking about the tragic night. On the tape, one of the men made a disturbing remark, declaring, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute." This sinister quote deeply alarmed federal agents, hinting at a cruel act disguised as a prank. By 2009, FBI agents formally interviewed Greg, Zach, Rostislav, and Josh as primary witnesses. During questioning, both Zach Rosenberg and Josh Askin invoked their Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, refusing to answer direct queries. Their stony silence and legal maneuvering left major gaps in the official timeline, raising further doubts about their innocence. Simultaneously, Greg Rosenberg attempted to establish a solid alibi for himself, his cousin Zach, and Rostislav by claiming they had ordered late-night room service to their cabin. However, ship logs directly contradicted his story. Room service records showed no orders placed from their stateroom, and crew members confirmed that delivery services to their cabin had been explicitly blocked earlier that evening due to their disruptive behavior. When pressed, Greg was unable to specify who had supposedly placed the food order. When investigators questioned the group about the dynamic between the newlyweds, witnesses offered conflicting accounts. Greg stated that extreme intoxication made it nearly impossible to gauge whether George and Jennifer were genuinely on good terms or teetering on the brink of a severe marital dispute. While his testimony left the nature of their relationship ambiguous, the evasive behavior of his companions continued to draw intense federal scrutiny, keeping the chilling mystery alive. Josh Askin provided additional details, claiming that Greg had left the stateroom after ordering food. However, Greg flatly denied this, insisting he never stepped outside. These sharp contradictions only deepened the confusion, forcing investigators to re-examine every piece of testimony. Crucially, Greg noted that while he had no knowledge of any involvement by Jennifer or Lloyd Botha in George's disappearance, he remained convinced the tragedy was no accident. He maintained that something chaotic had transpired that night, confidently asserting that the full truth would eventually come to light. Tragically, in December 2019, Greg Rosenberg was murdered, a crime that remains unsolved to this day, leaving police to explore potential connections between his death and George Smith's vanishing. The baffling disappearance of George Smith cast a long, painful shadow over his grieving family, while the suspicious actions of those involved continued to draw intense public and law enforcement scrutiny. Driven by an unyielding desire for justice, the Smith family relentlessly pressured authorities, ultimately prompting the FBI to transfer the case from its Connecticut regional office to its primary New York field office. Through frequent media appearances, they kept the story in the public eye, even offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to a conviction. Outraged by what they perceived as a corporate cover-up designed to protect profits, the family also called for a global boycott of the cruise line. Meanwhile, the relationship between George's parents and his young bride, Jennifer, completely fractured. In the wake of the tragedy, Jennifer's public demeanor appeared strangely composed and measured, sparking widespread suspicion, though she insisted she was merely following strict instructions from federal agents. The Smith family felt betrayed when she ultimately accepted a $1 million settlement from the cruise line. To George's parents, her willingness to settle seemed like a calculated effort to escape further accountability and shield the company from deeper exposure. They grew convinced she was harboring secrets, especially since Jennifer claimed to remember virtually nothing after 2:30 a.m., maintaining she had no memory of staff finding her passed out in the hallway or wheeling her back to her cabin. Dissatisfied with the official findings of the Turkish authorities, the Smith family took matters into their own hands by hiring renowned independent forensic expert Dr. Henry Lee. Dr. Lee conducted a meticulous forensic evaluation inside cabin 962 and on its balcony, crucial work that had been completely overlooked during the initial inquiry. His analysis directly challenged the accidental fall narrative, noting that the height of the balcony railing made a simple, unassisted tumble highly improbable. According to Dr. Lee, the physical evidence pointed to two main possibilities. Either George was forcibly pushed by a third party, or he climbed onto a chair in a state of severe impairment before falling. To test his theory, Dr. Lee sought to conduct a drop simulation using a dummy, but the cruise line flatly refused permission, a move the Smith family fiercely condemned as a deliberate attempt to stonewall the truth. Undeterred, Dr. Lee continued his examination of the cabin and balcony, striving to uncover the missing links in this enduring mystery. Dr. Henry Lee conducted extensive forensic analyses inside the cabin, on the balcony, and down on the lifeboat canopy, yet the results of his private investigation were never made public. Meanwhile, the FBI launched its own federal inquiry, keeping critical evidence closely guarded. Federal agents focused heavily on the four young men who spent those final hours with George: Josh Askin, Greg and Zach Rosenberg, and Rostislav Kaufman, whose conflicting testimonies deeply complicated the investigation. For years, George Smith's disappearance remained an agonizing mystery. Though his family initially suspected Jennifer, they eventually became convinced of her innocence and joined forces with her to increase the lawsuit settlement against the cruise line. The financial payout was split among them, finally securing the public release of the cruise company's internal investigation records, including crucial witness statements. Jennifer eventually dedicated her life to charitable work in George's honor, and later remarried, though she carried the heavy memory of her first husband. Despite exhaustive efforts, the FBI was never able to determine what truly transpired that night, nor did they ever recover George's body. Citing a lack of definitive evidence, federal authorities officially closed the case, ruling the tragic incident an accident. For George's loved ones, the inability to lay him to rest or visit a grave remains a heartbreaking ordeal. They refuse to give up hope, holding on to the belief that the truth will one day come to light. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to explore more baffling true crime cases and unsolved mysteries with us, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. There are many more shocking stories ahead.